Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the next webinar of the Productivity and Profitability webinar series. This series is being brought to you by Meat and Livestock Australia and Agrista. This series is designed to assist sheep, cattle and goat producers to increase the productivity and profitability of their businesses. In this series, we will be providing you with timely technical information that's relevant to producers across Australia. My name is Tanisha Shields and I am a consultant with Agrista and I will be your host for tonight's webinar. I would like to begin this webinar by acknowledging Australia's Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the traditional custodians of the lands with which we live, learn and work. We pay our respects to their elders, both past and present, and to our shared future. In tonight's webinar, I'm very excited to be hearing from Sally Martin all about whether eID can add value to your livestock business. But before I hand over to Sally, I'll just quickly cover off on the housekeeping for tonight's webinar. So tonight's webinar is being recorded, and a copy of the recording will be available on the Agrista and MLA websites in a few days. We invite you all to ask questions of Sally throughout tonight's webinar, and we're using Slido to answer the questions tonight. So if you head to slido.com and enter the code June0624, that's where you can ask your questions. We will then address the questions that you ask at the end of the webinar. Before we kick off, I'd like everyone to get your phones or computers out and jump on Slido to begin with. And we've got a few questions there for you to go through as a bit of an introduction survey to tonight's webinar. So that's about what best describes your role in the livestock industry, what sort of area you're managing, if you're managing any area, and what sort of livestock you're managing. So if all of the participants could just jump along and complete that survey, we will then move into the content of tonight's webinar. Thanks, everyone. I've got a few responses coming in there, which is great. We've got a few more just jumping in. So I'll leave that survey open just for a couple more minutes and then we'll move into Sally's presentation. For those who have just joined us in tonight's webinar, we're just taking a few moments to complete an introduction survey while those that are still coming on board are joining. So if you head to slido.com and enter the code June0624, that's where you can find the introduction survey. Make sure that you keep the Slido handy throughout tonight's webinar because this is also where you can ask questions of tonight's speaker. Thank you to everybody who has completed that survey. I'll now get ready to hand over to tonight's speaker, Sally. Sally grew up on a grazing property on the Monaro, studied agricultural science at UWS Hawkesbury and postgrad studies at UNE and Sydney Uni, focusing on genetics and animal breeding. Sally's career has taken a number of paths, working with New South Wales DPI for approximately 20 years to now running her own consultancy business since 2011 based out of Young. Sally services seed stock and commercial breeders and other service providers with a current client base ranging across Australia and internationally. Sally has extensive experience and knowledge working in livestock production systems, advising on farm management, animal health, reproduction, genetic selection and breeding program design while integrating with other enterprise demands. Sally has delivered key industry extension and research programs with a key emphasis on navigating ways to take the science and find practical implementation solutions. Thank you very much, Sally. I will now hand over to you to start your presentation.
Thanks, Tanisha. Very kind words. And it's a great to be here and to be able to share some of the experiences that I've learnt along the way. And I guess I've been using eID in trials and with clients for over 20 years now. So I guess a lot of what you'll hear tonight has been from the experience my experience with using them, but also some of the ways that we've been working with some of our clients. So hopefully you'll get a fair bit out of it. So it was really interesting, the topic that I was given in terms of, does it add value? And in terms of things that I'd like to cover this evening would be just having a bit of a look at some of the eID technology and then the opportunities to move from that mob-based management that people are doing, as well, moving to individual management. And I think there's a lot of information out there and opportunities, but where do you start? It can be a little bit confusing. So I've got a few ideas there. And then looking at how we can utilise those opportunities to be able to get that return on investment. So the mandatory side of things requires you to put a tag in, but how do we get that value back in terms of your own management, whether that be selection and using the information. And the last thing is that we'll talk a little bit about where to go to for help. So it can be a bit daunting, but there are a lot of people out there who are able to assist you in this mess. So in terms of eID, does it really add any value? And I guess if you start thinking about the eID tag as the enabler, you collecting the data and then what you're going to do with that is where you will add the value. You need to be able to use that information if you're going to get that value. So we can actually get a lot of information out of using visual tags, and they still work really well. But where you're going to get the greater benefit from electronic tags is that they will be more accurate. We've had situations where we've had people reading tags and you get numbers mixed up. And so in terms of improving that accuracy, it is faster for sure. And you can then start adding layers of complexity. And so where you might have, for example, a draft where you want to draft on multiple different facets, the electronic identification and the equipment that goes with it enables you to be able to do it. You can, what I would also say is, and this is coming back to where you might start if you haven't been doing this before, is start with a simple process and then build on it. You don't have to go from basic to deluxe in one foul swoop. And I think that's another really important message for anyone who's just starting to think about going down this pathway. Having a really clear idea about what you want to get out of the data, and we'll talk a bit more about that as we go through this evening. That I think is probably going to be a really important aspect, so that you're not actually capturing information that you're not going to use. You will require to use and to deal with a computer. So if you don't feel comfortable using a computer, there are definitely people who can help you. But if you have a smartphone, you're already able to use an app. A lot of the stuff, or a lot of the software that supports some of the electronic equipment is worked in and around that type of app process. So if you can do that, you should be able to get something out of it for sure. And if you're already capturing some information, how can you make, I guess, find those opportunities to be able to reuse that information? Or can you capture information that you're already doing? So, for example, pregnancy scanning is probably a really good one. So in terms of where to start, and I think having a bit of an understanding of the basics of the eID technology is a really good place in understanding, and I'll talk a little bit more in a moment about some of the terms that you might hear, but having an understanding of the capability of some of that technology, and also understanding its limitations. As I talked about before, knowing what you want to achieve with the extra data that you may be collecting, or it might actually just be getting all of the information that you have been, so for example, pregnancy scanning over a number of years, getting all that into one place. And I think if you start having that the idea of record keeping and sorting things out early on and have a process set in place, it will make things easier down the track as well. The plan that I've got mentioned there is about having your, as I said before, having a clear idea in terms of what data you think you might want to capture, and having a plan in terms of how you might go about that. So we'll look at your breeding objective in a moment, but that is a key component in terms of to help you identify what you might want to capture. When you capture it, so have a look at when you actually do other husbandry activities. Can you include it in another activity so that you're not having to yard animals just for a particular data capture? So a really good one is a weaning weight. It's a really good starting point for a lot of producers in terms of being able to then start looking at growth rates. So they're already in the yards. You can capture a weaning weight on the lambs, but you can also capture a weight on the ewes as well. And then you might actually start drafting them into their weight categories and feeding them accordingly so that you can actually meet certain targets that are part of your production and breeding objective. How you then go about collecting that information then could be around, as I said before, the timing, but it also could be you might need someone else to come in and actually capture that information for you. And instead of having all of the gear yourself, there definitely are service providers out there that are able to be able to help you to do that. And when you start thinking about going down the eID kind of journey, it is about the hardware. So, and we'll talk a bit about that in a moment, but also your software options. Do you need to have a lot of that, or can you get away with some basics and then make sure that what you have is compatible so you can build on that? I would look for after-sales service. How far away is it from you? Things do go wrong, and often it can be a quick fix, but it's really good to know that you have that support, and whether that's through your reseller or sales representatives or other service providers that are utilising a lot of the equipment as well can be quite handy. Having that backup, I think, is really important. So in terms of getting that, excuse me, that return on your investment, yes, the tag going from a visual to electronic will be an extra cost, but being able to get that return on investment will start with you. So I think putting the tag in is the easy part. Everything else that comes with it in terms of whether you've got to purchase equipment or finding someone else to do it, is the next step. And in terms of having, do you have to collect the data, and then how often you might be doing it? If you're already doing things, as I mentioned before, pregnancy scanning, that's a piece of data that you're actually already potentially capturing. Now you could capture it electronically instead of doing it just on a mob basis, and these are all the single ewes. Now you can actually identify which ewe was scanned with a single or a twin, and then you can actually start adding that information, like layering it and adding, say, for example, wet and drying at weaning or landmarking time. And we'll need to come back to that breeding objective, which we'll go into in a minute. I'd always go back and review what you're doing, and so that you can then plan for the next kind of phase and looking at analysing your information. Are you making progress? So in terms of your breeding objective, and this is just a really a simple example of what we use with some of our clients, and I think it's really important for people to capture it. So regardless of, think about all of the different, this is associated with breeding values, but think of all of the different traits or production drivers that you have on your farm. And for example, I've got fleece weight. Is it important? Do you want to increase it? Are you happy where it is? Decrease, or it's not important? And what I use is a 3 priority. So 3 ticks is a high priority, 2 ticks is a medium, and then a low. And what I would suggest you do is actually go through and identify all of the key traits that are really important, high priority, whether that might be looking at decreasing wrinkle or increasing growth rates, but maintaining mature size. And again, it really comes back to your production system and what you are looking at, doing on your farm. So by doing this, what we start to do is we start to be specific in terms of what traits we might start focusing on to start with. And the high priorities are the ones that you potentially would be going out and measuring so that you can start making more informed decisions around those. Knowing whether they're, can we measure them, and then looking at down the track in terms of, what changes you want to make. So do we want to reduce micron by a certain amount? Do we want to increase our growth rate so that we turn our weathers off 4 weeks earlier than we normally do? And they're the type of things we want to do this in a period of time, for example, within 5 years. So then we can start working back and then going into whether that be the U base and starting to select those U's on those particular traits in going in the direction that we want, but also complementing that with your RAM team and looking for those breeding values that are going to be able to take you in that direction. So some of the terms that you'll hear in this eID space, and we're really good with acronyms, but if you think what I've just done is and these aren't potentially all of them, but that I think it's a really good start. So sometimes you'll see this VID, which it refers to the visual tag, which is your identification, like a tag number. Your electronic tag, you may see something about like an RFID, and that's a radio frequency ID. They're both the same thing. You'll hear people talk about stick readers. I sometimes hear people talk about wands or something like that. They're not for hitting sheep either, like for tapping them along the road. They're for scanning sheep. And then the indicator, you've also got you might hear someone talk about, whether it's a scale head or a weigh scale or something like that. I'll show you some photos of these in a moment. Your panel reader, and we'll talk about a bucket file, which basically pairs up your electronic tag and a visual tag identification together in an Excel spreadsheet so that you can then have that information already combined for you that you can then upload into your indicator or stick reader or your software. Sometimes people ask about whether you need connectivity, so internet service, and sometimes that's required to be able to do backups. But generally speaking, most of the equipment will work on a Bluetooth or an internal Wi-Fi. So you don't necessarily need to have internet connection to utilise most of the equipment. And I guess where digital literacy starts to come in is also being able to, find some of the products can be reasonably intuitive, but it also comes down to, similar to your smartphones, using some of the apps and how they work, and understanding just how everything kind of comes together. So continually trying to learn in and around that kind of area. So when we start looking at the tags, there's a number, and given that we're going into mandatory eID, I really would stress if you're going to purchase electronic tags, say for this year, that you're actually making sure that they're NLIS accredited tags. I've got a few photos up on the top of this slide, so that are currently available. There are some others, so I just couldn't fit them all in. But some of the major brands that we've got, and again, I'd jump on the Department of Ag's websites where you can actually, and also there is an NLIS website that you can get all of the ones that are accredited. But so All Flex Save have a button one, which is similar to this one up the top of the screen, as well as these wraparounds. You've got your Z tags, and then you've also got so the leader, that's a leader one there, that is as well, and Shearwell. One of the main things with tags is where you put them. So placement of tags, I probably would say, if anything you take home tonight, placement of tags and making sure that it's not too close to the head so that it doesn't get knocked out with shearing, but it's not too close to the tip. It's about 2/3 along. And you also need to make sure that, so for example, with this tag or any of these tags, you just need to have some air, like it's not too tight on the ear, and you don't want to over compress. So what's happened with this photo here is this tag's potentially being over compressed when it's been put in. And so there's not enough airflow in and around this area here where I've got the mouse moving around. And so it actually gets an infection and starts to, make a larger hole, and that tag potentially will fall out. So tag placement, hygiene at tagging time, and making sure that there's airflow. So you can see that the stem, there's enough airflow there, is really, really important. What we also suggest is that after pregnancy scanning, you can put your tag order in and think about putting a printed tag number on the tag. So for example, this one has a printed tag number on it. That can, as I said before, talking about that electronic tag and a visual tag paired up, so you can still utilize this visual tag number to be able to identify that animal without actually having to scan the tag. And other compliance details that you need to consider, which is having your PIC as part of, similar to this one here, is a requirement as well. So some of the hardware that you may have heard about, and again, this is not 100%. There's other products out there, but I've just given these as an example. So when we talked about stick readers, these are your stick readers. So basically they're handheld. Their read range is a lot smaller than a panel reader, but they're very versatile in terms of you can use them in the shearing shed for fleece weighing, and you're able to use them up a race. And often people can get away, and you can do some general drafting with stick readers. You can have them on continuous. Their battery doesn't last quite as long. So they can act as a panel reader. This is a panel reader, so you've got the antenna here, and then the reader that then talks to one of these indicators that you would have on the side of some of these auto drafters, for example. And so the panel reader talks to the indicator, which then drives the drafters. Some of the indicators do have readers embedded in them, but you still need the antenna. These three items here are indicators, and they basically are able to screw on to load cells, so you can take weights, and this is just an example of three that are currently on the market. And then you'll have your handlers, your weigh crates, and your auto drafters. So they're probably some of the main hardware that you'll find. Oh, sorry. Oh. So in terms of what data you can collect, and I have talked about this before. So you've got your pregnancy scanning. I think, and I've got it at the top of the list because I think it's probably the one where you can capture that information year on year. So whether they're dry, singles or twins. We've got a lot of clients starting to look at whether they're early, mids and lates. People are trying to get their joinings a lot tighter. So this is another way to identify ewes that are constantly getting pregnant earlier. At landmarking time, you can actually capture some breech scores if you're interested in going down the non-mules pathway. Birth type, were they born in a single or a twin paddock, for example? So this is talking at the commercial level. At a ram breeder level, we can get into more detail when we've got full parentage, because you can also generate the rare type. Wet and drying the ewes at land marking is another piece of information to capture. Are the ewes getting pregnant with one and then being dry at land marking time? Unfortunately, you're not going to identify ewes that have had twins and maybe only reared one at a commercial level, but you can still start to see some trends. As I said before, weaning weights are really good to capture at weaning time on the lambs, but you can also capture a weight on the ewes or a condition score. If you're interested in growth rates, you need a couple of body weights, and I guess that's where having a weight at weaning time is really worthwhile. So then the next weight, you can work out your growth rates, grams per head per day, and are you hitting your targets? So if you want to be turning wethers off at a particular time, are they doing the growth rates that are going to get them turned off within that period that you want them, or is it going to take you longer? If you're interested in joining ewe lambs, these are some of the key times that you would start making sure that the ewe lambs are on the trajectory to be able to continue to put on weight and also get in lamb. Fleece traits that you might be interested in would be fibre diameter and a fleece weight, and staple length if you're interested in 6 months shearing. Visual scores, fleece rot in terms of looking at any potential body strike. If you're in the shedded breed, you might want to give a shedding score. So there's actually some scores out there that you can identify with sheep that are better at shedding, and maybe utilise that in your selection process. You can capture your animal health information, which also then goes to maybe feed into other programs that you might be wanting to report on. We're starting to find that some of the abattoirs are being able to provide us with greater information coming back from them. I was actually at Gundagai meat processors today, and they're able to provide you with individual animal information on intermuscular fat percentage, carcass weight, lean meat yield, and also up to 20 animal health potential issues. So, for example, you might be able to get some feedback. I was in the abattoir the other week, and we were looking at the offal trays, and there was some lesions and indicated that this sheep had hydatus. So, easy fix for that is worming dogs. So you can get that feedback, which also gives you an indication of how well you're going as well. If you've only got a small percentage, or you haven't got any that have maybe come up with arthritis or whatever it might be, but you can start to actually get some feedback on your own management program as well through some of these mechanisms. So this is just a really quick example of some of the information that you might see or you might have collected. Then you can, in this example, we've got pregnancy scanning in 2018 and whether they're wet or dry. And this particular ewe has been wet the whole time in this example, and she was fleece weighed at some point, and we've got a comment. She was actually born in our twin mob as well, and we've actually collected some other information, and so she is ranked 11th on this particular index that we've done. So we've said she's a keep. So there's a couple of things so a lot of information on that screen. You're not going to go through it all if you're drafting, or you might be just wanting certain pieces of information. So my suggestions then, in terms of looking at, say, your preg scans, you could actually put that into a number. So for example, this ewe, she's had she's been pregnant with a single twin. You could just have three numbers. So we know quickly looking at that she's, what she's had by just looking at something, straight away. So it's not having to go scroll through that whole list. So I think the quicker and you can actually have some of that information available, then you can actually start making some of those decisions there and there on the spot. So that's just a couple of little tips that we use. And instead of having the index number there, we've actually got a rank so we can know what our cutoff is. And another thing that we can potentially use is we could actually just go, well, this is a keep or a cull. And that you can just have your stick reader and have that loaded up on your stick reader, go down the race, and anything that comes up with a cull, just put a red dot and draft it at the end of the race. So you don't necessarily have to have an auto drafter, but you can utilize that information as well. So as I was talking before a little bit about, so I think like a basic kind of system to have is the electronic tag. A stick reader, I think, is pretty handy. You can, if I might just quickly go back. I know it's probably not the best. But if you've got a stick reader, so this stick reader and this one, can't see the top of it, but they have keypads that you can actually put information in. So you could capture up a number of traits into these stick readers. And so that enables you to be able to capture some information without having to have all of the bells and whistles. Again, basic traits, but also you can then utilize Excel to be able to start managing that information. So the other kind of, so you can have the basic and then think about, well, if I want to add on to that, what else do I need? So you could progress then to getting a panel reader that adds on to your weigh scales so you can capture things more automated. And that is also where your auto drafter is going to come in handy. Some of the handlers have drafting facilities and you can do multiple things with them. And then potentially progressing as you, over time, you might look at some of the software packages to be able to manage the layers of data that you're capturing, if that's, where you want to head. Again, I'd just start simply and grow your confidence. I often look at how, a lot of this stuff is not cheap, but if you can have it in a location that is potentially permanent, undercover, you'll potentially use it more. So if you think of dollars per use and how often you'll use it, then the information that you're capturing from it, then hopefully that will then add to the value of what you're getting out of it, and you start getting that return on investment. I just wanted to, so this is just a mob of weathers. They're actually weathers that are running at a weather trial, Australian Marina production trial. So there's actually 50 teams of weathers in here. And, they all look, well, there's a few that look a little bit different, the little fella at the front. But generally speaking, you'd say, well, that could be a mob of views that you have at home. And so what I wanted to point out with this particular slide is that the variation that exists within this mob of, and this is a mob of weathers, undoubtedly you would get exactly the same variation in a mob of views. And we've got some that are cutting, say, $100 worth of wool, and some that are cutting 28, and everything in between. Not all animals are equal, and what the key to getting that return on investment for utilising eID is actually to identify those low performers and using that information to be able to then make sure that the low performers either go into a different production system, or you're able to exit them as quick as you can. And so I'll go through just here now in terms of where some of the benefits of having that individual data. And we talk about the low hanging fruit. Well, what's that mean? So where you've got a normal distribution, and you'll get this similar type of distribution within your flock, depending on whether it's for weights, fleece weights, and all the major production traits, we get this variation. So what we want to be able to do, I guess at a stud level, we're wanting to identify these really top performers that we want to then continue to multiply their genetics. But definitely at a commercial level, we want to identify these lower performers and look at taking them out of the system as quickly as we can. One of the key things I do find, and this is another example of some ewes that we've fleece weighed and micron tested, and just to highlight that variation. So along the bottom here, we've got the fleece weight, and up the side here, we've got the micron test. There's a number of ewes here that are at 6 kilos of wool, and there's some that are just below 17 micron and others that are 22 micron for the same fleece weight. And you'll get the same for, we've got, if you look at 17 micron, we've got some animals that are cutting just above 5 kilos up to nearly 7. So that's the variation that you will have, and I see this all the time. But what it is that's opportunity. So identifying those animals that are, and again, coming back to your breeding objective, are they, if your breeding objective is to identify animals that are cutting more wool, that are finer, that still getting lamb and rear their lambs. So we want to make sure that we can identify those animals. And this is, I guess, the best way that we can start to do that. So if we've got, say, the average, and whether this might be our post-weaning weight that we've got, and we're really keen to, say, join new lambs, for example. If that's where we currently sit at the moment, our average weight at maybe just a little bit after weaning, or even could be at weaning time, is 30 kilos. Just bear with me. And we want to keep taking out this bottom end. So by the time we keep doing this over a number of years, what you'll end up with is animals that are their average. So we're looking at the deviation from the average is higher, but we've also got that over the selection decisions over time has been able to take and move our average up, is what I'm trying to highlight there. So it might be incremental improvements, and there's probably no major silver bullets, but what we're trying to do is being able to make sure that we're measuring some of this information to know, are we actually on track? So with any data collection, the timing and when you do it and how you do it, I think are really important. I do believe that if data is worth collecting, it's worth doing properly. And if you can organise it in and around current management and husbandry, I think that's a great idea. But if you can't, then, and if the data capture or whatever it might be is really important, then I think it's, you need to make that extra time. Often don't be in a rush. When you rush, you don't often do things as well as you might want to. And so you might need to think, well, it's really important for us to capture these weaning weights, for example. Normally we do, let's just say, I don't know, a couple thousand a day or whatever it might be, but we really want to make sure that we can do this. So we're actually going to spread it out over a couple more days to make sure that we can do each mob at a time and get them processed and everything, so that you're actually capturing that information, and it's quality data that you can then make decisions. Because I think if you don't have quality information, it can potentially send you down the wrong path. If you are going to do a body weight, try and aim to have animals off feed for a couple of hours prior to weighing them, and also try and do them as quickly as possible. So which kind of contradicts what I just said a minute ago, but what I mean by that is don't be weighing starting early in the morning and that same mob, you've got to go and do another job and then come back and finish them. So that's doing it in a reasonable time frame. And if you're doing any fleece weighing, a minimum of 9 to 10 months of age, and we want them to have at least 5 months wool for fibre diameter and 6 months wool for fleece weight. The critical thing is be consistent. If you are interested in micron testing and you're thinking, well, you know, do I do a mid-side or a pin bone sample? Either's fine, just be consistent. So if you are fleece weighing, do you put the belly in or the belly out? I would put the belly in. And the reason that I suggest to do that is that you do get variation with bellies. And if fleece weight's important, you'll also get variation with how shearers take the belly off as well. So some people find that it's not as important, but it's really not that much extra. And a lot of the sheds that we work with, it's quite a simple process in making sure that the belly's with the fleece when it's fleece weighed, and then you can pop the belly in another bin. So if traits are important, should you measure them? And as I said before, I think it is worthwhile doing. And I just wanted to show you an example. And are there shortcuts? There probably are, but does that give you the right information? So in this particular example, we had a client who was interested. The concept was, do we do a body weight as the sheep come in the shed, and then another body weight after they're shorn, and then the difference will give us a fleece weight. So what we did is we weighed the animals on the way in, and we actually collected the fleece weight so that we could compare, and then we weighed the animals on the way out of after they were shorn. And this was the variation. So the correlation between so this is the actual fleece weight along the bottom, and this is the difference in the two body weights. So as you can see, the correlation's not very good, and we've got a lot of variation. So we actually had we've got negative numbers, and then compared to their actuals. So really, if fleece weight was important, this is probably not the best way to go about it. And I've just popped this information into a table just so you can have a quick look. So the average fleece body weight going in was 33.5, and coming out was 29.5. So we've got 3.9 difference. So on average, that could have been the fleece weight, but on average, there was a kilo. There was a kilo less. And we had some animals that were 5 kilos above and below. So if you're thinking about doing it, I'd potentially suggest that there may be a better way to do it. So could eID change what you do? I think there's some good opportunities to be able to use your information to be able to use it down the track, and in having your culling decisions and knowing that you're getting out those low performers, but also knowing, can you use that data, to look at your breeding objective. And this is just a couple of examples where knowing what's in your breeding objective is really important. So in this particular example, what we've done here is this is a client that we've captured the fleece weights and the microns, and also a body weight, but the index that we used did not include the body weight. So effectively, we've got our tops that we've identified, so they're the higher indexing animals, and I won't go into the details of how the index was put together. So this is a Rand Power Index, so using the similar parameters that Sheep Genetics does. But what we've got is, yes, we've got the ones that they're in the top group are finer and cutting more wool, and the ones that we're culling are broader and cutting less. But if you have a look here, the body weights across the groups are quite similar. So when we went back to the breeding objective, we actually wanted to be looking at having animals that grew quicker so that we were able to turn the wethers off. So we really do need to include the body weight. So when we did, we did change. So this particular example actually includes the body weight in the index. So all of these sheep have been ranked on the index. Again, the culls are cutting less and they're broader, but they're also smaller. And the ones that we've retained are heavier, they're still finer, and they're cutting more wool. So now I guess we'll have the overlay of all the pregnancy information that will continue to go on to this. But I guess I just wanted to highlight this in terms of if we don't include a trait in an index or in our selection process, then we may actually be selecting animals that may not be directly targeting what our breeding objective is. So the other thing I just wanted to capture on is data. Can we capture information without actually scanning a tag? And the answer is yes. So at landmarking time, and this is where having your tag number in a seat printed on your tag can really be helpful. So what we do is we capture the tag sequence for each of the mobs that you might mark. And for example, we've got the 24 drop, and we've got starting with tag number 1. So 24 is the year of birth. So this is really quick and easy to look at. 23 would be a 23 drop. And then you can also have your colours, your tag colours, year of birth and all that as well. But what I find useful is that we can actually talk about having the twins. So this particular mob was the twins, and they're out of maiden ewes. So we can actually start identifying this information and then to be able to use this down the track. So what we're recording is the birth type, the dam, and potentially you could actually start having your paddocks and also adding that into the information. And how that might come about is we get these bucket files. So I talked about this briefly before. So this is what a bucket file would look like. So you've got your PIC, your property identification code, your electronic identification, that's your NLIS, and this visual tag. What I've done here is we've tidied this bucket file up, and we've got our electronic tag, our visual. This is the year that these particular sheep were born. These ones were all twins. They were all born in the twin paddock. So we know their birth type. We don't 100% know their rare type unless we're doing full pedigree. But we've actually got them. We know that they're a maiden, and they're out of a particular paddock. So we can start, and I'll go through in a minute how we can then start utilising this later on. So that data capture at landmarking, so you could actually upload that information that we've captured here. You could actually upload that onto your stick reader or your indicator, and you could actually draft on this. So you could actually use this as part of a draft that you might want to do to be able to, before classing, for example, and I'll go through how that might work. So that information, let's say we've uploaded that, and without capturing a lot of information, if you still visually class your ewes, you can upload that information. You could draft your twins out of your maidens or your twins out of your mature age, and your singles separately, and actually class the twins first. So that what we're trying to do is not disadvantage any of the twin-born animals because they may be slightly phenotypically smaller, but genetically they still have the potential. So we're comparing them against themselves, like with like, rather than having that big, shiny twin born first out of a 5-year-old ewe compared to a late-born twin born out of a maiden or a ewe lamb, for example. You can also capture information at landmarking time that you do need to require, scan a tag. And we've got Bridget here. She's been capturing breech wrinkle scores, and you might even want to go to the length of capturing an age score. Again, I think it's very much about that return on your pregnancy and how you might manage that in nutrition, particularly for your singles and twins. All the principles with lifetime ewe and the udder assessments. I think there's been some great work done over recently. I know DPI and also MLA, in terms of are they fit for purpose, and so we can actually start having a look at some of those. You don't necessarily need to capture all this electronically, but it's still a matter of, is there certain animals that are being more prone to these type of issues? And by you doing all of this, we're starting to increase our weaning percentages, which then gives us the opportunity to have a higher culling rate, to have that greater selection pressure. So this is just a couple of examples too, in terms of how you can actually start looking at, if you've got ewes that are having singles each year, but we've also got a number of ewes. This is a commercial client that has been capturing the pregnancy scanning for a long time, and also wet and drying. And it's these repeat offenders, if you want to call them that can really start adding that value, and knowing that the sheep that you do retain are the ones that are actually doing all the heavy lifting. So this is, another way that you can, these are just some examples in terms of how you can utilize some of that information. This is actually from a producer demonstration project that we've got, looking at joining ewe lambs, where we've got the body weight and the pregnancy scanning information, and the number of dries. So we've got the number of dries that are, more dries at a lower weight, and less at the higher weight. We can then start to overlay that information, similar to the slide before, where you can start to see, yes, we do have ewes that were dry as ewe lambs, but we've also got a number of, and it was interesting, we went back and had a look at a lot of these ewes here that were dry at their second joining, that did and were pregnant as a ewe lamb. And majority of these were actually did rear a lamb, so they were wet at lamb marking time. The question then is, did we give those ewes enough time to get back in lamb, to be able to recover? So you can start having a bit of a look at how you might utilise some of that information. In terms of, can eID save you costs? And I think, yes, there are options and ways that can happen. And there's a couple of products out there where we can have variable dose rates in terms of weight for, say, drenching. And that has potentially multiple factors in terms of, yes, it does save you costs in terms of you're actually drenching for specific weights. You can also be looking at potentially reducing resistance on your farm if you are able to make sure that the right dose is going to the right animal. And I guess that having that look at making sure that the animals in terms are actually producing the products that we want, because if we're looking at shearing costs and you've got animals that are cutting you $30 worth of wool and others that are cutting you $80, our variable cost in terms of the cost of shearing per sheep is the same. So yeah, starting to have a look at some of those kind of opportunities. And this is just a really quick one in terms of showing how you might be able to actually utilise this data down the track later on in multiple times or over multiple times. So this particular example is, you've got six, if I can count, 6 age groups, and we've done some measurement on them and we've ranked them. So what you can do is actually looking at down in later years, you can actually re-rank them in their mobs. So we're not comparing the 23 drop with the 22. We're just comparing the 22 within their age groups. And on this side, we've just got an example, and I've done this for multiple clients to have a look at how this might look in terms of the bottom line. So we'll just go through this example quickly. in that this is the overall average, let's say, of these 6 drops, and normally we'd take out cull for age. So if we were to take out cull for age, the average weight, we've dropped a kilo. We've similar fleece weights, micron body, and we've got a slight it's not as good actually, because we've actually taken out some good performing ewes in this particular age group. But if you were actually to take the cull across a percentage across all age groups, and making sure that anything that's still retained is still fit for purpose in terms of, has sound udders, teeth, toes, and all of that. What you actually find is that we have an improvement of some of the key traits, and it doesn't look like a lot here in this particular example, and there's only a $5 a head benefit. But I did have a look at some more recently, and the benefit was closer to $9 or $10 per head by just taking out the lower performing animals across all age groups. And this could be if you want to, you're in a drought situation, or you just have surplus sheep. It gives you an indication that you're actually retaining better animals that you're putting the effort into retaining. So just quickly, in terms of what else you can use some of this data for, and I was listening to previous webinars within this series, and the kind of key take-home message was keeping really good records, but also and knowing where you might be able to use that information. So there's a number of integrity programs that you might be able to utilise it with if you're wanting to go looking at monitoring your carbon intensity, having your stock numbers, growth rates, and some of those other days to target that how long it will take you to get to your target weights and things like that can actually potentially be utilising in multiple different ways. And I think having a really good understanding of what your breeding objective is and being able to articulate that with other people in the team, and knowing that there are limitations with some of the equipment it's not all perfect, it's not all seamless, but I think if you can have some decent systems and processes in place that can really help and getting it set up right from the start will be beneficial. How often you're going to capture the information? If it's going to be often, then I think there's a great opportunity for you to learn how to use all the equipment. But if you're not, then it could be an opportunity to engage someone else just to come in, capture that information. You know where you want to use it, but you don't have to do it all yourself. And no one is good at stuff for the first time. So be patient with yourself and know that there is support out there if you do need to do things. So in terms of things that I haven't covered tonight but are still important is having a really good system where to save all your information, and knowing that you can come back and compare year on year or paddock to paddock. And we haven't really touched on many of the software or the apps, so there's a number of those in place. But I think knowing that, you don't have to have all the bells and whistles to start with, and start simply is probably, I guess, another key message. I'd have a plan, have a staged approach, and build your confidence, knowing that it doesn't have to be, I think that the simpler you can keep it, the more you're going to do it, and be clear at why you want to do it. And in terms of data capture and interpretation, I think having that, being able to convert some of the information into making those decisions. So think about when you want to make that decision, and then how long it'll take you to get that information, and work back from that. And that's probably something that we do a lot with the people that we work with, so that we know that we've got it in a timely manner. And then some information you'll have, and you'll be able to make decisions in real time, like as you're capturing it. And I guess there's multiple ways that you can capture the information and effectively use it down the track. And as I said before, tag application and placement, I can't stress enough the importance of that and taking your time at landmarking time or whenever you might be putting the tags in. So I feel like I've rushed through that a lot. There is a reasonable amount of tools and resources that potentially can help you that I've got up on the screen at the moment that will be in the information that you guys are sent out for. And I guess know that there are people out there working in this space who have a reasonable amount of experience and willing to help. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Sally. There was definitely a lot of ground to cover in a very short period of time. So it's great to get an overview of where people might make a start in this eID space and how that might add value to businesses. Just in the interest of time, I've got a couple of questions in the questions box that I'll go through now while we're changing over. And if anyone has any questions, remember to head to slido.com and enter the code June0624. And if we don't get to your question in the next couple of minutes, Sally and I are also recording a podcast episode. So we will be sure to cover any questions that aren't answered tonight in there. Sally, the first one that's come through is, what data would you recommend a non-merino business use or collect?
So a non-merino, probably comes back to key things I would think would be growth rates, so body weights, and in the shedding for shedders, I would think that a shedding score may be important if they're not all shedding completely, from feedback that people have talked to me about. And I think pregnancy scanning across the board, in terms of reproduction and wet and drying, I think they're probably the key ones. But I'd come back to your breeding objective. What's important to you? What's important to your production system? And then start thinking about what key traits are driving your system. What are you getting paid for? Probably is one of the and then work back from that.
Excellent. Thanks, Sally. And the last question that I have here is, how does eID impact on labour and handling? Does it make it easier or harder?
Depends. Look, that's a really tricky one to answer. There'd be multiple ways that it could overcomplicate things and make things more time consuming. However, I think if you value the information, then you'll make that work and it won't be seen as too onerous. But if you don't value it, then it can become a chore. So I'd go back to what's going to be important and again, start really simply and find what key traits are really important to you and your production system, and and as I said before, what you get paid for.
Excellent. Thanks, Sally. And thank you to everyone who's joined us for tonight's webinar. As I mentioned, there's a couple of other questions that have come through, but Sally and I will address them in our podcast episode. Thank you so much, Sally, for sharing some really great information on how producers can use eID in their livestock businesses and how to start simply rather than it seeming like this very technical world that's tricky to reach into. For those that are still online, if you have any additional questions or suggestions for future webinar topics, please reach out by completing the survey at the QR code or on Slido that's on the screen. This feedback's really important to us as it helps us to guide what topics we cover in the future and to make sure that we're presenting relevant information for you. If you're listening to the recording, please also complete this survey. Thank you again all for attending, and we look forward to you joining us for our next webinar, which will be on the 10th of July. We're changing tact a little bit and we'll be hearing from Callan Thompson about growing beef from dairy. If you missed last month's webinar, head over to the MLA or Agrista website to watch it, and be sure to check out our podcast series. You can find that on all major podcast platforms under the Productivity and Profitability series. So happy listening, and Thank you, Sally, and thanks everyone for joining tonight.
No worries. Have a good evening.